My pastor dad's double life is about to be exposed and only I can help him, but his secret boyfriend turns the tables and gets revenge on him for cheating. I, 17M, come from a very conservative family to say the least. Or at least I thought I did. Because it turns out my pastor father has been living a double life for years. My grandpa founded our church and was the head pastor until he retired only a year before he died. My dad took over from him and has managed to quickly grow the congregation to nearly 2,000 members. All of my uncles are either associate pastors or deacons, and all of the women in the family are highly involved. Because of all of this, I was basically treated like royalty by most members of the church, and as the firstborn son of Pastor Ed, I was the prince. Except my family had a secret that only I knew about. Well, only me and my dad. A secret that could destroy this family's legacy and ruin the church. That my dad is gay, and has had a secret boyfriend for years. His name is Todd, and he's tired of living in the shadows. All of it so shocking for any number of reasons, one being that my dad is adamantly opposed to that kind of thing in his public life and preachings, and another being that he's been married with 4 kids for 20 years. But to me personally, finding out my hard-as-nails father had a boyfriend was completely earth-shattering. This was a man who once grounded me for a month because I watched an R-rated movie at a sleepover. He wouldn't let me go on a class trip because it was during hot months and the girls would be too scantily dressed. I swear, my dad always expected me to be some kind of a saint or something, punishing me for the slightest moral infractions. Turns out he's no saint himself. It all started last Christmas when Dad was in his office at home working on the Christmas Eve sermon. I remember that Christmas was going to be on a Sunday that year, and as he was always anxious about his big sermons, he was up late into the night all week preparing in his home office. My mom has always gone to bed early, but my dad and I are eternal night owls. Us pastors' kids have a reputation for being a little wild, and I guess him staying up late had its advantages. He could keep an eye on me a whole lot easier that way. Except this time, I was keeping my eye on him. Or more specifically, my ears. My dad's office is right below my bedroom and isn't as well insulated as he thinks. Normally the only thing about it that bothers me are the tapping of his keys and his occasional phone calls, but all of those are usually pretty short and formal in nature, and happen during business hours. But as I sat in my room reading, barely able to keep my eyes open around 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, I heard my dad's voice excitedly whispering from below. I put my book down and got down on my hands and knees and stuck my ear to the vent on the floor. He was arguing with someone over the phone, and despite the whispering, I could still hear the anger in his voice. Perhaps especially because of the whispering. I was searching my mind for anyone that he could be chewing out on the phone at 1 a.m. on Christmas morning and of course could come up with no one. My father didn't have any enemies to speak of, at least not that I knew of, but then again who knows what the truth could be? Stranger things have happened and I guess Dad has been able to garner a certain level of power and influence. It's only natural that someone out there would want to take him down a peg. But then I began hearing snippets of the conversation the two were having, and then my slight worry over the situation rapidly turned into a full mind-blowing meltdown. No, my dad said into the phone with his voice rising, you know how this works. It's been this way for years, Todd. Todd? Who the heck was Todd? I'd soon find out when my dad would explain to him that no, he won't be able to sneak away on Christmas to see him. I just can't see you, I'm sorry. You know I always try but I can't. But you know how much I love you. My heart sank and I could feel the color flush from my face. For a second I was hoping that it actually dozed off and was dreaming. That this was all just a horrible nightmare I'd mercifully wake up from any second. If I could only have been so lucky. As I lay there in the dark staring up at the ceiling, I went over every word I heard from down below. I tried to spin it every which way I could, but there was absolutely no denying the context of what I'd heard. My father had some type of a romantic relationship with some dude named Todd, and they've been together for more than one Christmas. And my dad loves him. Well, I didn't sleep a wink that night, and with my family being against having caffeine in the house, Christmas morning was a complete and total slog. I tried my best to be excited for the presents I got, but it was nearly impossible to muster up the energy. Of course it would have been hard to get excited about the series of sweaters, socks and religious books I was opening anyway, but my dad was beginning to notice. In fact, I could feel his judging glare on me before he even said anything. What's wrong, Jonah? Aren't you excited to read your books? I just told him that yes, of course I was, and tried to focus on my little siblings being happy about their own presents, but that was easier said than done, and now I had to go to our family's church and listen to my dad preach. I felt as if a tornado had ripped apart my insides. I knew that my life was now forever changed. There would be a before and an after. Before I heard that phone call and everything else that followed. All of the consequences and repercussions. I just don't know yet what those repercussions are going to be. It's Christmas night. I'm exhausted but I still can't sleep. After being awake for almost 45 hours, I still can't freaking sleep. I guess I should probably just log off and close my eyes, right? Shining the bright light of my phone into my face must not be helping my insomnia. But what's really not helping is the fact that my dad has been living a lie his entire life while telling other people how to live theirs. I was disgusted and ashamed. Not only for him but for my entire family. I never believed any of that stuff that he preached about people. I think people are who they are and I guess that my dad is that way too. But if he's going to be a massive hypocrite about it, that changes everything. But it's not like I can put him in front of the entire congregation and my family. It would literally destroy everything. Despite his faults and our troubled relationship, I don't think that he deserves that. But he also doesn't deserve the right to tell people what to do, and make a career out of living a lie. But most importantly, bamboozle and betray my mom for decades. But honestly, I'm just a 17-year-old and I realize my limitations right now. I don't want to make any decisions that are going to mess up the rest of my life either. So does anybody a little more mature than me and with good intentions have any ideas as to how I can approach this thing? Honestly, you read about these things happening in the news, but I never thought it would happen to me, to my family. My dad was like a religious drill instructor. It would be like if a hardcore Marine hunter type was found at a highway rest stop. I'll update you with any, well, updates I guess. Update 1. Hey everyone, thanks for all of the replies. I know that this is kind of a controversial subject and stirs up a lot of mixed feelings. Well, a lot of it was helpful, but some of it is totally useless now, because just about the time that I was going to go through with confronting my dad privately about what I heard, it all blew up in his face without me having to say a word. And it all started at my parents' annual New Year's Eve party. Despite mom and dad being so lame about everything else, New Year's Eve was the one night of the year that they let themselves have a good time. They had a bunch of people over from the church to sing songs and play games, and of course there was no alcohol, but people still managed to have a nice time. The party grew so big last year that they simply couldn't fit everyone in their house and decided to have it at the church. Everything was set up as usual, including the fact that everyone was excited except me. Believe me, I tried to be, but the fact of the matter is that I just can't wait to be 18 and get the heck out of this house. I want to experience the world and see what it has to offer, and get out of this protective bubble my dad has created for me. The one that he had to escape in small bursts with Todd over the years, who decided to make midnight at the church on New Year's Eve his grand entrance into my family's lives, and of course the church's as well. Because it turns out that just because my father is not a drinker doesn't mean that his secret boyfriend Todd isn't. He walked in, or should I say stumbled in, holding a half-empty bottle of some brownish liquid as we had just started the 10-second countdown to midnight. Even in his disheveled state, I have to say that he was a pretty good-looking guy. I like girls, but at least my dad had good taste. Todd had kind of a Colin Farrell type vibe going on. Of course that didn't make up for the fact that he joined the countdown along with us, except he screamed it in a loud and obnoxious tone that drew everyone's attention away from the clock. By the time the new year was upon us, all eyes were on Todd, including my father's, who was rushing his way to try his best to push him out of the room. But the fact is that Todd was mad as heck and would not take it anymore. He would not be removed by anybody, and most of all this pastor, his secret love. Instead he ran up onto the stage, his coat soaking wet from the rain and snow and dripping all along the way. He took the microphone behind the podium and started his grand announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Todd and I have something very serious to tell you about your pastor. Dad started towards him, but his knees aren't what they used to. Flare-ups from an old football knee injury have left him completely unable to run. But Todd continued on. Your pastor and I are lovers. Gasps from the crowd of partygoers gave way to shocked and furious screams as Todd continued, and we have been for years. Dad was halfway to the stage when he slipped on the wet puddles of sludge that Todd had left behind, and he landed with a thud on his left hip. He cried out in pain as people rushed to his aid. Don't help the cheater, Todd screamed. Let him writhe in his own hypocrisy. Suddenly 2 of my uncles came from both sides of the stage and rushed Todd, tackling him to the ground before dragging him out. Todd yelled the word hypocrisy over and over all along the way until he was out of earshot. Someone tried to help my dad up, but he was too hurt to move. And all I could do was just stand there frozen still, unable to move or think or do anything. Pastor Ed's house of cards was tumbling before my very eyes, but will anyone in the congregation believe any of it is actually true? It's still yet to be known. Of course I'm the only one who knows the truth, but my dad could easily play it off as some crazy who just needs the Lord. But my mom may have a tougher sell. Surely she's noticed some signs over the years and will start putting 2 and 2 together soon. But I don't know, maybe not. She could very well be in as deep denial as the rest of the church. But all I know is that I'm not in denial. I know what's going on and it's only me who knows. Well, only me, my dad and Todd. It's yet to be seen how everyone is going to handle this, but so far my parents are simply not talking about it. Even though it's been all of New Year's Day, there has been no mention or explanation of it at all. And while that may make them feel more comfortable in the meantime, in the long term it's totally unsustainable. I'll report back to you as usual with any updates. Update 2. Hey everyone, sorry for taking so long with an update, but I'm glad I waited because I have the ultimate one to share. Basically, I think my family dynasty is finally coming to an end, finally just about to crumble after all these years. And it all comes down to my father's hypocrisy, pride and arrogance. Because he actually thought that he could pull the wool over everyone's eyes. He actually thought the flock would buy all of his BS and just forget the insane display they saw on New Year's Eve. The thing about churches and our church in particular is that people love to gossip, and the story about Todd barging in with a bottle in hand and giving his impassioned speech was essentially front-page news the next morning. But even worse than that, the story was twisted through multiple tellings of the events just like a game of telephone. The real one was worse enough, but by the end of the week it was alleged that Pastor Ed was involved in criminal acts beyond forgiveness. Yet the stubborn old fool refused to address the issue again after his tepid denial the NXT Sunday, which did nothing to tamp down the increasingly crazy gossip. Eventually by week 4 my mom had turned on him as well. Todd was calling our house and trying to talk to her to tell her his side of the story for weeks, and eventually Dad had banned her from answering the phone. But of course he was at the church all day and she was home, so naturally the two started to speak. She heard the entire story of the relationship. It's been going on for 10 years. 10 freaking years. I can't even begin to imagine the awkwardness of the call, and thankfully I wasn't in the house. Mom only told me about it later. But they met while Dad was doing counseling for young people at some ministry. Todd's family had tried to send him there for his gayness among his many other personality quirks, and the Eddie, as Todd called him, took him under his wing in a way he didn't expect from the religious organization. And then they simply fell in love. He wanted my mom to know that it was nothing personal against her, despite how ridiculous that sounds, and he regrets hurting her. He especially regrets his behavior in outing her husband so publicly and at such a bad time. I would think that my mom would be furious about the entire thing, but I guess she somehow took it all in stride. In fact, I think it was good for her to hear the real story, because Lord knows she'd never get it from Dad. But there was just one thing that hasn't been talked about, and that was an allegation that the drunken Todd had made while he was screaming and being carried away by my uncles on New Year's Eve. Along with calling my dad a hypocrite, he called him a cheater several times. What did he mean by this? Did he mean that my dad was cheating on my mom with him, or the other way around? Or was there someone else entirely that no one but Todd knew about? My mom didn't ask about this at all, which shocked and baffled me. She needed to know this information immediately and then probably get herself tested for any possible diseases. If my dad was promiscuous with anyone, male or female, who knows what he could have. The more I thought about, the angrier I was for her. But I was also angry at her for not thinking this through. Had she not heard him yell cheater over and over? I decided that I had to hear the truth once and for all, and the only way that I was going to be able to do that was to go straight to the source, which meant going straight to Todd. It was going to be hard talking to my father's secret gay lover, that was for sure, but I knew that I had to do it for my mom's sake if not for my own. I'd always had my problems with my dad, that was no secret. We've butted heads many different times over the years. He's the most stubborn person in the world and he simply has to be right at all times. He can be savage with a put down and cruel with his punishment. He can also be kind and loving, but it always seems like we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I definitely never expected him to be as messed up as he clearly is, and when I got to talk to Todd late one night I finally got to hear about it. I got into my dad's phone and found the number that he was talking to on Christ Eve and texted it on my phone. I told him who I was and that I'd known about this for longer than anyone else, and that I wasn't angry or judgmental. I just wanted to talk and hear the whole story. I wasn't expecting much, but to my surprise Todd wanted to meet for coffee as soon as I could. It was as good a time as any, even though it was getting a bit late, but I came up with an excuse to borrow the car for a while and Mom and Dad seemed to buy it. We met at a Waffle House, which was his choice and I was fine with it, but I was too nervous to order anything but a Sprite to help calm my stomach. Thankfully I wasn't anxious for long because it turns out that Todd is a really cool guy. He put me at ease immediately and I wondered why someone would fall for his easy charm. He drank about 7 cups of black coffee as he told me the story of how he and my dad have been a secret couple for years, and all of their methods of sneaking around my mom to carry on their passionate affair. For instance, while there would be some pastors' conferences that my dad would attend out of town, a vast majority of them over the years have been lies set up so he could spend a week or sometimes 2 with Todd. And all those late nights in his church off alone agonizing over his sermons were actually spent over at Todd's chic apartment, of course, which they helped decorate together. But things have turned sour recently when my dad has apparently been texting with a younger guy that the two of them met at a farmer's market last fall. Todd found out about it and has been trying to get closer to my dad and get him to commit, but it wasn't working out. I swear, it was like he was describing an entirely different person than my dad. But despite all of my dad's hypocrisy and cruelty, I can't help but feel sorry for him. He's been living a lie for so long that I don't think he even knows who he is anymore. And I think he was so hard on us kids, me especially, but even more especially my mom, because he was frustrated and angry that he couldn't be who he wanted to be. After all, my dad was the son of the great Pastor Earl who built our church from the ground up. Before me my dad was the original prince. But because of that he was always doomed to live in hiding. That is, until he was forced out, because slowly the wave of pressure turned against him to resign from the church. Todd started posting photos of the two of them together on the church's social media pages, the two of them smiling while hiking or on a white sandy beach. Even for the loyal congregation it was too much for their eyes to deny, and Dad made his big announcement just before Valentine's Day. He was as cocky as ever as he did it, vowing that he'd be exonerated for these crimes against man. But nevertheless, Dad's out and one of my uncles has taken over. So I guess the family legacy moves on for now, but it will never be the same. Several members have already quit the church and it's rumored that many more are on their way out. The church is of course fully funded by donations, and they need every penny they get. Meanwhile my dad just stays in his office all day all by himself, leaving everyone to wonder what he's doing. Everyone except me of course, because I already know. Because as I put my ear to the cold vent on my bedroom floor, I can hear him muttering late into the night, along with a frequent clink of ice cubes into a glass followed by a short pouring sound. He mutters and whimpers, and while it's hard to make out most of it, what is clear as day is Todd, come back to me said over and over like a meditation chant.